It was a bright and sunny Saturday morning in the little neighborhood of Oakwood Hills. The sun was shining high in the sky, making everything look happy and warm. Birds were singing their cheerful songs, flying from tree to tree. Lawns all around were buzzing with the sound of mowers cutting grass, filling the air with that fresh, green smell. Kids were laughing somewhere down the street, and it felt like the perfect day to just relax and have fun. In the middle of all this, Jake Miller was out in his backyard, hanging out with his goofy German shepherd, Max. Max was a big, fluffy dog with a wagging tail and a silly grin, the kind of dog that makes you smile just by looking at him. Jake loved Max more than anything. They were best buddies, always together, playing fetch or just sitting in the grass. Now, Jake wasn't some fancy, important person. He wasn't a movie star or a rich guy with a big house. Nope, he was just a regular dude. He worked at the hardware store in town, helping people buy hammers, nails, and paint. It wasn't a glamorous job, but Jake liked it. He was a simple guy who didn't need much, just his little house, his backyard, and his dog. He didn't bother anyone, and he didn't like drama. He just wanted to live his life and enjoy his days with Max. But here's the thing, not everyone in Oakwood Hills saw Jake that way. Some people didn't think he fit in. And one person, in particular, had her eye on him, and not in a nice way. That person was Karen Whitmore. Karen Whitmore wasn't just any neighbor. Oh no, she was special, or at least, she thought she was. Karen was the queen of the HOA, which stands for Homeowners Association. That's a group of people who make rules for the neighborhood, like how tall your grass can be or what color your house can be painted. Karen loved being in charge. She acted like the whole street belonged to her, like she was the boss of everyone. If your mailbox was a little crooked or your trash can stayed out too long, Karen would know. And she'd make sure you knew she knew. She'd leave notes, knock on doors, or just stare at you with her grumpy face until you fixed whatever she didn't like. To Karen, Oakwood Hills was her kingdom, and she was the ruler who kept it perfect. But Jake? To Karen, Jake was trouble. She didn't like him. She didn't like his messy hair or his old truck parked in the driveway. And most of all, she didn't like Max. That big, happy dog drove her crazy. Every time Max barked or ran around, Karen would frown and mutter to herself. She thought Jake didn't belong in her perfect little world. She'd watch him from her house across the street, peeking out her window like a hawk watching a mouse. Jake didn't know it, but Karen had big plans to make his life harder. And that sunny Saturday morning? That's when it all started. Before I tell you more, let me ask you something fun. What would you do if someone called the cops on your dog just for being a dog? Would you laugh? Would you get mad? Maybe you'd just shrug and let it go. Think about it, and stick around, because this story is about to get wild. I promise you won't want to miss what happens next. So, back to that morning. Jake woke up feeling good. The sun was out, the air was warm, and he didn't have to work. Perfect day to play outside, he thought. He grabbed a cup of coffee, opened the back door, and let Max loose in the yard. Max bounded out like a kid on a playground, his big paws thumping the ground. Jake smiled and leaned against the door, watching his dog sniff the grass and chase his own tail. It was their routine, nothing fancy, just a man and his dog enjoying a lazy day. Soon enough, Max found a spot near the fence and started digging. His paws flew, kicking up dirt in little clouds. Jake chuckled. That's just Max being Max, he said to himself. Max loved digging holes. It was his favorite game, even if it left the yard looking like a mess. Jake didn't mind. He'd fill the holes later. No big deal. What Jake didn't know was that someone else did mind. A lot. Across the street, behind her fancy white curtains, Karen Whitmore was watching. She wasn't just glancing out her window, she was staring. She had her binoculars pressed to her face, her lips pressed tight in a grumpy line. To her, Max digging wasn't just a dog having fun. It was a crime. A disaster. A personal attack on her perfect neighborhood. That dog, she hissed to herself. That awful, dirty dog. And that Jake, he's just as bad. Karen didn't see a happy pup or a nice guy. She saw trouble. She saw someone breaking her rules, even if there wasn't really a rule about dogs digging in their own yard. Karen didn't care about facts. She cared about control. Jake had no idea any of this was happening. He tossed Max a tennis ball and watched him chase it, barking like crazy. The day felt normal, peaceful even. Birds kept chirping, the mower down the street kept humming, and the sun kept shining. Jake sat on his back steps, sipping his coffee, thinking about maybe grilling some burgers later. It was the kind of morning where nothing big was supposed to happen. Just a quiet, happy day. But quiet days don't last when someone like Karen is around. See, Karen wasn't just watching. She was planning. She'd been waiting for a chance to get Jake in trouble, to show him who was boss. And Max digging? That was her golden ticket. She put down her binoculars and grabbed her phone. Her fingers shook a little, not because she was scared, but because she was so mad she could hardly stand it. This is it, she thought. I've had enough of that dog and that man. Time to teach them a lesson. She didn't just want Jake to stop. She wanted him embarrassed. She wanted everyone to see he didn't belong. Jake, still clueless, scratched Max behind the ears as the dog dropped the ball at his feet. Good boy, he said, tossing it again. Max ran off, tail wagging like a windshield wiper. The yard was a little messy now, with dirt piled up near the fence, but Jake didn't care. He liked his life simple. He liked his dog happy. What he didn't know, what he couldn't see, was that trouble was already on its way. Karen wasn't just annoyed. She was furious. And she was about to do something that would turn this ordinary day into something no one in Oakwood Hills would forget. Karen Whitmore wasn't like most neighbors. She wasn't the kind of person who'd wave hello or bring you cookies just because. No way. Karen was different. She was the kind of lady who thought she owned the whole street. She'd walk around with a ruler in her hand, yes, a real ruler, and measure your grass to make sure it wasn't too tall. If it was even a tiny bit longer than she liked, like half an inch, you'd find a mean note on your door the next day. Cut your grass, it might say, or this is a nice neighborhood, act like it. Karen loved rules. She loved telling people what to do. And if you didn't listen? Oh, she'd make sure you felt bad about it. To Karen, Jake Miller was a problem. A big one. She didn't see him as a nice guy with a fun dog. Nope. To her, he was just that messy guy with the loud dog. She'd stare at him from her house across the street, her eyes narrow and her mouth all tight like she'd just eaten a sour lemon. Every time she saw Jake, she'd mutter to herself. Rules, she'd say under her breath. Standards. It was like Jake broke some big law just by living there. She didn't like his old truck in the driveway. She didn't like his messy hair or the way he wore old jeans instead of fancy clothes. And Max? That big, happy German shepherd? Karen hated him most of all. Max was loud sometimes. He'd bark at squirrels or wag his tail so hard it thumped the ground. To Jake, that was just Max being a dog, cute and silly. But to Karen, it was a disaster. Every bark was like a siren in her ears. Every wag of his tail made her madder. She'd glare at Jake and Max every chance she got, her arms crossed tight over her chest. She'd stand on her porch or peek out her window, watching them like a grumpy cat watches a bird. Jake didn't notice most of the time. He was too busy tossing a ball for Max or sipping his coffee. But Karen noticed everything. And that sunny Saturday morning? That was the day she decided she couldn't take it anymore. It all started when Max started digging near the fence. Jake was in the backyard, just chilling like usual. Max was kicking up dirt with his big paws, making little clouds of dust fly around. Jake laughed. Goofy dog, he said, shaking his head. To him, it was no big deal. Dogs dig. That's what they do. But across the street, Karen was watching. And to her, it wasn't funny. It wasn't cute. It was wrong. Disgraceful, she huffed, her voice sharp and loud even though she was talking to herself. She stood at her window, her hands on her hips, watching Max tear up the yard. That dog, she said. That awful, dirty dog. She didn't care that it was Jake's yard. To Karen, Max digging was like a personal attack on her perfect neighborhood. Karen's face turned red. Her eyes got big and wild. She couldn't just stand there and watch anymore. She had to do something. She stormed over to her kitchen counter, her slippers slapping the floor. She grabbed her phone with shaky hands, not because she was scared, but because she was so mad she could hardly think straight. This is it, she thought. I've had enough. That dog and that messy guy, they're ruining everything. She didn't just want Max to stop digging. She didn't just want Jake to say sorry. No, Karen wanted more. She wanted Jake in trouble, big trouble. She wanted everyone to see he didn't belong in Oakwood Hills. So, what did she do? She dialed 911. That's right, the emergency number you call for fires or robbers or when someone's really hurt. Karen held the phone to her ear, her voice loud and squeaky as she screeched into it. Help, she yelled. There's a dangerous animal tearing up my neighborhood. Send someone now. Her words came out fast, like she was in a panic. She made it sound like Max was some wild monster, not a goofy dog with a tennis ball. It's out of control, she added. Hurry. She hung up and smirked a little, thinking she'd won. In her mind, she'd just saved the day. She'd show Jake who was boss. But here's the funny part, Jake had no idea any of this was happening. He was still out in the backyard, totally clueless. Max dropped the ball at his feet, wagging his tail like crazy. Jake picked it up and tossed it across the yard. Go get it, boy, he said, smiling as Max ran off, barking happily. To Jake, it was just another fun moment with his dog. He didn't hear Karen's phone call. He didn't see her angry face. He didn't know she'd just told the police a big, wild story about Max being dangerous. Jake was just living his life, enjoying the sunshine, while Karen painted him as some kind of bad guy. Now, here's where it gets even better. Max wasn't the only one digging that day. Something else was going on, something Karen didn't know about. See, Jake had hired some landscapers to come fix up his yard. They were supposed to show up that morning with shovels and tools to make everything look nice. Max was just having fun, digging his little hole, but soon there'd be more digging, way more than Karen expected. She thought she had everything under control, calling the cops like that. She thought she'd scare Jake and make him stop. But she didn't know the whole story. She didn't know what was coming. Karen stood by her window, waiting. She wanted to see the police car roll up. She wanted to see Jake's face when they told him off. She imagined him looking all ashamed while she stood there, arms crossed, feeling proud. That'll teach him, she thought. No one breaks my rules. But Jake? He just kept playing with Max, tossing that ball back and forth. The birds kept singing. The sun kept shining. Everything seemed calm and normal, except it wasn't. Trouble was on its way, and not just for Jake. Karen had no clue she'd just started something she couldn't stop. Karen Whitmore was ready for a fight. She stood on her porch, pacing back and forth, her arms crossed tight. Her slippers slapped the wood with every step, and her face was all scrunched up like she'd just smelled something bad. She kept looking down the street, waiting. She'd called the police, and now she wanted to hear sirens. She wanted to see lights flashing. She wanted Jake Miller to know he'd messed with the wrong lady. He'll see, she muttered to herself. Him and that awful dog, they'll learn to follow my rules. Karen was sure she'd won. She thought the cops would show up, yell at Jake, and make him stop. Then she could go back to her perfect little world. But across the street, Jake had no idea what Karen was up to. He was still in his backyard, just hanging out with Max. The sun was warm, the grass was soft, and Max was having the best day ever. Except now, something weird was happening. Max wasn't running around like usual. He wasn't chasing his ball or barking at birds. Instead, he kept pawing at the same spot near the fence. Over and over, his big paws dug into the dirt, kicking it up in little piles. He'd dig, then stop, then dig again. And every time he stopped, he'd let out a little whine like a puppy who wanted a treat. Jake tilted his head and watched. "What's up, buddy?" he said, scratching his messy hair. Max just kept going, his tail wagging slow like he was on a mission. Jake wandered over to the fence, his sneakers crunching on the grass. He squatted down next to Max and peeked into the hole. It wasn't very deep yet, just a little dip in the dirt. But then he saw it, something shiny. Something metal. It glinted in the sunlight, catching his eye like a coin in the mud. "Huh," Jake said, rubbing his chin. "That's weird, right?" He reached down and brushed some dirt away with his hand, trying to get a better look. The shiny thing was still mostly buried, but it looked hard and smooth, not like a rock or a stick. Maybe it was an old toy or a piece of junk someone threw away. Jake shrugged. Probably nothing, he thought. He stood up, brushed the dirt off his hands, and figured he'd deal with it later. Max could dig all he wanted, Jake wasn't worried. But while Jake was chilling, Karen's plan was starting to work. Down the street, a police car turned the corner. Its lights flashed red and blue, spinning bright against the houses. The car rolled slow, then stopped right in front of Jake's place. Karen's eyes lit up. Finally, she said, clapping her hands once. She marched off her porch, her slippers flapping loud, and headed straight for the cop car. She didn't even wait for the officer to get out. She just started pointing at Jake like he'd done something terrible. "That's him," she shouted, her voice high and squeaky. "Him and that beast. They're ruining everything." She waved her arms like she was directing traffic, her face turning redder by the second. The car door opened, and out stepped Officer Dan. He was a tall guy with a friendly face and a calm voice, not the kind of cop who yells right away. He adjusted his hat and looked at Karen, one eyebrow going up like he wasn't sure what was happening. "Ma'am," he said, nice and slow, "what's going on here?" Karen didn't slow down. "That dog," she yelled, pointing at Max. "It's dangerous. It's tearing up the neighborhood. You need to do something now." She made it sound like Max was a wild wolf, not a goofy pup with dirt on his nose. Officer Dan turned his head and looked at Jake's yard. There was Max, wagging his tail, sitting next to his little hole. Jake stood nearby, holding a tennis ball, looking confused but not mad. Officer Dan scratched his head. "Ma'am," he said, "it's just a dog digging. What's the emergency?" His voice was so calm it almost made Karen madder. Her face went from red to tomato red, like she couldn't believe he wasn't running over to arrest Jake right then and there. "Just digging," she snapped. "That's not just digging. It's a mess. It's against the rules." She stomped her foot, her hands balled into fists. But Officer Dan didn't budge. He just stood there, looking from Karen to Jake, trying to figure out why this was such a big deal. Jake, meanwhile, stayed cool. He didn't yell back or get upset. He just pet Max on the head and said, "Hey, boy, you're okay." Max licked his hand, happy as ever. But even though Jake looked calm, his mind was buzzing a little. That shiny thing in the dirt, it was still there, stuck in his head. What was it? Why did Max keep going back to that spot? Most dogs dig for fun, but Max was acting like he'd found treasure. Jake glanced at the hole again, then back at Karen and the cop. He didn't know what she was so mad about, but he figured it'd blow over. Karen was always mad about something, right? Karen kept talking, her voice getting louder. "He doesn't belong here," she said, pointing at Jake. "Him and that dog, they're trouble." Officer Dan nodded like he was listening, but his face said he wasn't too worried. "Okay, ma'am," he said. "Let's just take it easy. I'll talk to him." He started walking toward Jake's yard, his boots crunching on the gravel. Karen followed close behind, her arms still crossed, a smug little smile on her face. She thought she'd won. She thought Jake was about to get in big trouble. But here's the thing, Karen didn't know everything. She thought this was just about a noisy dog and a messy guy. She thought calling the cops would fix it all. But Max's digging? That shiny thing in the hole? It was more than junk. It was a clue. A little hint of something big. Jake didn't know it yet, and Karen definitely didn't know it, but this wasn't just a normal day anymore. Max wasn't just digging for fun. He was digging up something that would change everything. Karen had kicked off something huge with that 911 call. She thought she was in control, but she'd just opened a door she couldn't close. Jake pet Max again, watching Officer Dan walk closer. The shiny thing glinted in the dirt, small but bright. What was it? Why did it matter? The answer was coming, and it was going to be way bigger than a noisy dog complaint. Stick around, because this story's about to get wild. Things were getting tense in Jake's backyard. Officer Dan had listened to Karen's loud complaining, but he didn't seem too worried. He'd walked over to Jake, asked a few questions, and scratched Max behind the ears. "Looks like a good dog to me," Officer Dan said with a little smile. Jake nodded, petting Max too. "He's the best," Jake said. Karen huffed and puffed from across the yard, Her arms crossed tight, but Officer Dan wasn't in a rush to do anything big. He was about to say goodbye and head back to his car. Just keep the digging under control, okay, he told Jake, turning to leave. Jake shrugged. Sure thing, he said. It seemed like the whole silly mess was over. But then boom, everything changed. Just as Officer Dan took a step toward the street, a big truck rumbled up to Jake's house. It was loud, with a deep growl from its engine, and it stopped right in front of the yard. The doors swung open, and out hopped two guys wearing bright green vests. They looked strong and ready to work, with shovels and tools hanging off their belts. These weren't just random guys, they were landscapers, and they were right on time. Jake had called them weeks ago to come fix up his yard, make it look nice and neat. He'd totally forgotten they were coming today until that truck rolled in. Karen froze. Her eyes got wide, and her mouth opened a little, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She stood there, stuck like a statue, watching the landscapers grab their stuff and head toward Jake's backyard. What are they doing here? She snapped, her voice sharp and loud. She pointed at the guys like they'd done something wrong just by showing up. Jake turned to her with a big, easy grin. Oh, didn't I mention, he said, all casual. They're redoing my yard today. Max just got a head start. He laughed a little, petting Max's fluffy head. Max wagged his tail, happy as ever, like he knew he'd helped. Karen's face twisted up. She didn't like that answer not one bit. Redoing your yard, she yelled. That's ridiculous. You can't just. But before she could finish, something even bigger happened. One of the landscapers, a big, burly guy named Tom, walked over to the hole Max had been digging. He'd seen Max pawing at it earlier and got curious. Hey, Jake. Tom called, waving his arm. You gotta see this. His voice was loud and excited, like he'd found something cool. Jake tilted his head and walked over, Max trotting right behind him. Officer Dan stopped too, turning back to watch. Even Karen peeked over, though she still looked mad. Tom grabbed a shovel and started digging where Max had left off. The dirt flew fast as he worked, making the hole deeper and wider. Max barked, bouncing around like he was cheering Tom on. Jake squatted down to get a better look. What's down there? He asked. Tom grinned, his hands dirty. Just wait, he said. After a few more scoops, his shovel hit something hard. Clang. It wasn't a rock, it was metal. Tom dropped the shovel and used his hands to pull it out. Up came an old metal box, rusty and scratched, like it'd been buried for years. It was small, about the size of a lunchbox, with a little lock on the front. It looked mysterious, like something from a pirate story. Whoa, Jake said, his eyes big. What is that? Max barked again, sniffing the box like it was his new favorite toy. Tom held it up, brushing off the dirt. Let's find out, he said. The other landscaper ran over with a tool, a little hammer, and they popped the rusty lock open with a quick tap. The lid creaked as it lifted, and everyone leaned in to see. Karen stepped closer too, even though she didn't want to look curious. Officer Dan watched from a few feet away, his hands on his hips. Inside the box? Papers. Old, yellow papers, folded up tight. There were some blurry photos too, and a big sheet with fancy writing on it. Jake picked up the big sheet and unfolded it slow. His eyes scanned the words, and his mouth dropped open. No way, he whispered. Tom peeked over his shoulder. What's it say? He asked. Jake looked up, his voice shaky but excited. It's a deed, he said. A deed to my land. And it says my property goes way farther than I thought. He pointed at the paper, then at the fence. It stretches right over there into her backyard. Karen's jaw dropped. She looked like someone had just dumped cold water on her head. What? She screeched, stomping over. That's impossible. That's my house. She snatched at the paper, but Jake held it up high so she couldn't grab it. Look for yourself, he said, pointing at the lines and numbers. The deed was old, signed years ago by someone who owned the land before Jake or Karen moved in. It showed Jake's property wasn't just his little yard, it went way past the fence, right into Karen's precious backyard where she kept her perfect flowers and fancy bird bath. Karen's face went white, then red, then white again. No, she yelled. That can't be right. You're lying. She turned to Officer Dan, her hands waving wild. "He's making it up. Arrest him." But Officer Dan didn't move. He stepped closer, took the deed from Jake, and looked at it with his calm eyes. After a minute, he nodded slow. "Looks real to me," he said. Then he smirked a little, sneaky smirk, and tipped his hat at Karen. "Seems like your emergency just dug up some truth, ma'am." Karen stood there, her mouth open, no words coming out. The landscapers laughed, and Max barked like he was proud. Jake couldn't believe it either. "So, that's mine?" he asked, pointing at Karen's yard. Officer Dan shrugged. "If this paper's legit and it looks like it is, then yeah. You own it?" Tom clapped Jake on the back. "Nice one, man," he said. "Your dog's a genius." By the time Monday rolled around, everyone in Oakwood Hills knew the big news. Word spread fast, like wildfire on a windy day. Jake Miller wasn't just that messy guy with the loud dog anymore. Nope, he was something way bigger. That old deed Max dug up proved he owned half of Karen Whitmore's perfect lawn. It wasn't just a little patch of grass either, it was a huge chunk of her precious backyard, where she kept her fancy flowers and her shiny bird bath. People couldn't stop talking about it. Kids whispered about it on the school bus. Neighbors chatted over their fences. Jake wasn't the guy they used to ignore, he was the guy who'd won something huge. Karen didn't take it well. She tried to fight it. Oh boy, did she try. She stomped around, yelling that the deed couldn't be real. "It's fake," she shouted to anyone who'd listen. She even called a lawyer, a guy in a suit who looked at the paper with a serious face. But after a long look, the lawyer shook his head. "It's legit," he said. "Signed decades ago, all proper and legal." That meant it was real, super real. The deed had been buried for years, forgotten under the dirt, but it still counted. The HOA, that group Karen loved so much, had to step in. They pulled out their big maps and started drawing new lines. When they were done, Jake's land stretched way past his old fence, right into Karen's yard. She couldn't do a thing about it. Karen's time as the neighborhood boss was over. She used to rule Oakwood Hills like a queen, telling everyone what to do. "Cut your grass," she'd say. "No loud dogs," she'd snap. But now, no one listened. She'd lost her power, and everyone could see it. The HOA didn't back her up anymore. Her title as the big dictator was gone, poof, just like that. Neighbors who used to roll their eyes at Jake started waving hello instead. "Hey, Jake," they'd call from their porches. "Nice job, Max." Max became a hero, the goofy dog who'd changed everything. Kids ran up to pet him, and people tossed him extra treats, bones and biscuits galore. Max loved it, wagging his tail like crazy. Karen, though. She didn't come outside much anymore. She stayed in her house, sulking behind her fancy white curtains. She'd peek out sometimes, her face all grumpy, watching Jake and Max enjoy their new land. Her days of bossing people around were done, and she hated it. She'd wanted Jake to feel small, but now she was the one feeling tiny. It was a big switch, and she couldn't stand it. Jake didn't rub it in her face. He wasn't that kind of guy. He didn't laugh at Karen or brag to everyone. Instead, he got to work. He fixed up his new land, planting grass and making it look nice. The landscapers helped, smoothing out the dirt Max had dug up. And Max? Jake let him dig all he wanted. "Go for it, buddy," he'd say, tossing a ball for Max to chase. The yard wasn't perfect, it was still a little messy, but it was theirs. Jake and Max were happy, and that's what mattered. In the end, justice came in a funny way. Karen's mean plan backfired, and Jake came out on top. The neighborhood felt different now, friendlier, less strict. People smiled more, and Max was the star of the show. It was a happy ending for the good guys, and Karen? Well, she'd have to figure out how to live without being the boss. Tough luck for her. So, what's the big lesson from this crazy story? Let's think about it. Sometimes, the people who yell the loudest like Karen have secrets they don't want anyone to know. She was always complaining, pointing fingers, and acting like she was perfect. But in the end, she was the one who got caught off guard. Her big plan to get Jake in trouble turned into a mess for her instead. And then there's Jake and Max, the quiet ones. They didn't make a fuss. They didn't try to show off. But guess what? They had surprises hidden up their sleeves, or in Max's case, under his paws. Those surprises were so big, they knocked everyone off their feet, even Karen. This story shows us something cool. Life can be tricky sometimes. People might try to boss you around or make you feel small, just like Karen did to Jake. They might think they're better than you or that you don't belong. But here's the secret: don't give up. Keep going, even if it's just a little bit at a time. Jake stayed calm. Max kept digging. And look what happened: they found something amazing that changed everything. So, next time someone tries to put you down or tell you you're not good enough, don't stop. Keep digging, maybe not in the dirt like Max, but in your own way. Try hard at what you love. Stick with it. You never know what you'll find. It could be something awesome, something that makes everyone see you in a whole new way. Think about Max for a second. He's just a goofy dog, right? But he didn't care what Karen thought. He dug because he wanted to, and that led to the big surprise. You can be like Max too. Don't let grumpy people stop you from being yourself. The quiet ones, the ones who don't brag or shout, sometimes end up with the best stories. Jake didn't fight back with loud words. He just let the truth come out, and it was way stronger than anything Karen could say. That's pretty cool, isn't it? It's like a superpower, staying chill and letting good things happen. So, what do you think about all this? Did that twist with the deed surprise you? I bet you didn't see it coming. I'd love to hear what you liked best. Drop a comment below and tell me, was it Max digging up the box? Or maybe Karen's face when she found out she lost? Oh, and if the story made you smile or cheer for Jake and Max, smash that like button. It tells me you had fun, and I'll know to bring you more stories like this one. There's so much more to tell, and I can't wait to share the next adventure with you. See you soon for another wild ride. Keep being awesome, and don't forget you've got your own surprises to dig up someday.